So it seems like only yesterday that I was here and getting to know many of you, and it's so great to see you're still at it, and I'm still at it, and we're still at it. And you know what? We were ahead of the game, you know? And in fact, you could say we were ahead of the curve, and the curve has been catching up to us big time. So it's very exciting to have kind of laid out the groundwork for transformation. And I feel like that's what we're doing together. That's what all of you are doing in your struggles, in your big vision, and in the work that we're all doing in our communities. So big thanks for that. And that was just a wonderful, incredible overview that you just gave of the challenge and the way forward. And, you know, I'll just say that you're absolutely right. I agree with everything that you said. And I think what the incredible opportunity is right now is how do we seize this moment? It's kind of a moment of, you know, of dire necessity meeting transformative opportunity. And you put those two together, and that's an unstoppable combination. And that's where we are, you know, at this moment in history, where we just can't go on like this. Not ecologically, not economically, not democratically, not in terms of international relations and foreign policy. We are really at the dead end. I mean, in fact, we are way beyond the dead end, and we need to pull back from the brink here, really beyond the brink. We need to, you know, jump back up on the cliff really quickly. We're sort of in a free fall in many ways. But the exciting thing is actually that it's not rocket science how to do this. And furthermore, we have the numbers to do it. And divided is exactly how they want us. And shall we say, apolitical and tuned out and not wanting to connect with politics and get your hands dirty, that's exactly the way they want it. Jody has a way of telling people who say they're not going to vote that that's exactly what the bastards want you to do. And in fact, you know, for that reason alone, you know, we all have a duty to come out and fight the powers that be, to quote the original hip-hop group. Fight the power that be. And voting and seizing political power is the name of the game. I think we all know that we are in this magical moment where the social movements are thriving. The Black Lives Matter movement, the immigrant rights movement, the Fight for 15, and the incredible surge of worker power who are standing up for living wages and the right to form unions and for decent health insurance and benefits. You know, it's just staggering for those of us who've been around the block here for a few decades working on this stuff to see it just, you know, erupting all around us. It feels like such a, it's a very magical moment. Students who are leading the charge to abolish debt, abolish student debt, which I think is one of the really big opportunities of the moment. Harnessing the power of the millennials to change history is really critical. And that has always been kind of the leading edge of transformative change. And we have this situation, basically, where young people are indentured servants, in debt, 40 million of them, actually. 40 million who are in debt without a prospect, without a reasonable prospect of getting out of it, because the jobs that are being created now are low-wage, temporary, and part-time, insecure, benefit-poor jobs. 75%. They don't want you to know that, the powers that be, but 75% of all jobs created since the so-called recovery have been these low-wage and part-time jobs. So that doesn't enable you to both pay your rent and pay your debt, you know, or ever get out of it and get ahead of it. So there is this army of activists that's really waiting just to be activated. And I think it's really critical as we try to build the structure of green parties and we try to get engagement to really be putting that front and center. The abolition of student debt and making higher education free is really critical for engaging the power of that younger generation. You know, and then the climate movement, and especially the indigenous communities and other frontline communities have really been leading the charge for climate justice, to protect Mother Earth, to protect humanity. The courage of that movement is just staggering and jaw-dropping. The Lakota tribe, who have set up their tents, I think it's the Rosebud Lakota that have set up their teepees along the route of the KXL pipeline and have let it be known that this is their sacred ground and they are not leaving. So, you know, they will live with the land and they will die with the land. And standing up with that kind of courage is, you know, I think it's an inspiration to us all. And if the rest of us showed that kind of courage and we do it together, there's no way, you know, that we can be stopped from this transformation that it is our responsibility to undertake. I think, you know, these are the movements, really, and they have a power of their own. They are alive and well. As I see it, our job, you know, as a political party is, or shall we say, that's our purpose as a political party, is to give political voice and political traction to these social movements. Social movements throughout history have to get political at some point in order to take power and really create change. We see this happening before our eyes right now in Greece with the rise of Syriza, which was basically, it was a movement in the street for many years, and it was a flourishing movement in the street because austerity is absolutely merciless in Europe and in Greece. They then began to realize it wasn't enough to just have a fantastic rally and go home. You also needed to actually take the reins of power, and they brought together lots of small parties, and within the course of 5 years they went from 3% in elections to 37%. So when people tell you, you know, what good does it do to support a small party, you know, I think it helps to just make that point that, you know, good things start small. They have to start small. And history is doing the work for us. I used to think as an advocate, I used to be so discouraged, feeling like how are we ever going to change people's minds? And I used to move from one issue to the next, hoping that, oh, campaign finance reform, that's how everybody will come together. We can all get behind campaign finance reform, right? And then we can push it through. Or, you know, the environment, because it's a health issue, you know, and it hits everybody very up close and personal, asthma and learning disabilities and, you know, heart disease, all these things that are linked to pollution and to climate injustice. That'll get us all activated, right? So that we can push things through, get to critical mass, you know, and I began to realize after 10 or 15 years of doing that work that it wasn't going to happen with one issue. You know, it was really, we would never get to critical mass. They want us divided and conquered. They want us divided by issues. They want us divided by states. They want us divided by nations. They want us divided by race. They want us divided by class. But you actually put us together, we have the numbers, you know, for which resistance is absolutely futile. If you add together 1 out of 2 Americans that is in poverty or low income, according to the Census Bureau, at the last census, 1 in 2 American families is in poverty or low income, heading for poverty. 40 million students are in debt. Students and former students are in debt, essentially indentured servants. 1 out of 3 African Americans are held hostage by the racist prison state. You add those numbers up, if we can coordinate around a broad agenda that meets all of our needs, an agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit, so it changes the profiteering system that exploits us and harms us all. If we can get together around that, you know, we are an absolutely unstoppable force. Yeah. And that's the opportunity, and that's the challenge, and that's the mission of our campaign, is to actually lift up these grassroots struggles so they are at the front lines, not only of their communities, they're at the front lines of presidential dialogue. It's actually quite outrageous to think that presidential dialogue should be about anything but frontline issues of jobs and wages and healthcare and debt and climate and peace and racism and the prison state. And when we launched our campaign, actually 4 months ago, it's hard to believe it's passed so quickly since the launch of our exploratory, I've been kind of traveling around the country, going to frontline communities, posing the question, would it serve your cause to have a presidential campaign to which you have a hotline? You know, a presidential campaign that's all about you and lifting up your voice. And, you know, our very first trip was to the border in Texas to, you know, work with immigrant community and also the communities struggling against fracking in Denton, Texas, where they actually banned fracking in the heart of the fossil fuel empire. And then we were in New York working with James Lane, one of our candidates for Congress, who was challenging Pantaleo, the DA, the district attorney who refused to indict the murderer of Eric Garner. So then we were up there to support the Black Lives Matter struggle and the struggle on Staten Island, where people are still trying to recover from Hurricane Sandy, and had, you know, an enthusiastic welcome there. I was really honored to be able to go to Washington, D.C. on Mother's Day to support the mothers of victims of police violence who were coming together to lift up their struggle for Black Lives Matter to protect all children and all, you know, all people really, but their cause was to broaden their struggle and to take their sadness and their tragedy and turn it into a, you know, a community effort to create citizen review boards, you know, demanding that we have standing investigative attorneys that don't have to be specially appointed. They're just there as a matter of course when violence occurs at the hands of the police, that all of those cases will be investigated. Because many of them are not. They're not even reported, let alone investigated. Very few of them, you know, ever come even to a grand jury. And, you know, it should not be the DAs who have close connections with the local police that are in charge of those grand juries. And furthermore, that we need a system of restorative justice, not this system of criminal, racist injustice that has filled our jails with people of color. We need a system of justice. Does the name ring a bell for people? Have you heard this new, larger approach of restorative justice? It's such a no-brainer of an idea that we can actually preempt most violence before it occurs. It's like the idea that we can actually preempt most sickness before it occurs. 75% of all of our healthcare expenditures, and we're spending $3 trillion a year. Got that? $3 trillion, not $1 trillion, which is what we spend on the military-industrial security complex, but $3 trillion on a sick care system, which is not making us well. It just allows us to continue sick, makes us bankrupt from the cost of these treatments, which are, you know, sometimes not helpful, sometimes harmful. And it makes pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies very rich. So what's wrong with this picture? We can fix that. We can also fix our system of criminal justice, which doesn't have to be the outrageous failure that it is. It does not keep people out of jail. It's sort of a system of revenge. And it creates this revolving door in and out of jail to hopelessness in the communities back into jail. So how about we just fix that hopelessness in the communities to start with? Then people are not being forced into jail, and you don't have the level of community violence in which cops are on a hair trigger and go shooting up the town. So this is a fixable problem. We have the know-how to fix it. And putting that together with these other issues, issues of a job as a human right, the issues of health care as a human right for everyone, the issue of education as a human right, abolishing debt, ensuring that we have strong public schools for everyone. And it's a tribute to Seattle that people here, families and teachers and students, helped lead the way to begin the pushback against high-stakes testing, which is an abuse. It's an abuse of our students and of our teachers. It's used as a political tool to close down the schools of low-income communities and replace them with profiteering charter schools. So thank you, Seattle, for putting a stop to that. Beginning to put a stop. Now you've got New York State, which is, continuing the struggle, and it's very exciting how these things bounce from coast to coast and lift us all up. So these are, some of the engines, I think, of change right now that are really revving full speed. Political campaigns are a way to give those social movements bigger voice. We are, by the way, determined right now to get into the presidential debates, and we have some special tools cooking. I'll tell you what they are. So we are now in the process of becoming a plaintiff on a second case, and these two cases are going to be filed very soon, and they are with some very interesting partners who have more financial resources than we do, so they can actually ensure that we have the attorneys we need and the witnesses that we will need to actually run these cases through, and we have very good lawyers. One of the cases which is public, so it hasn't filed, but it's public, so I can mention it. It has had two lawyers putting it together. One is Rocky Anderson, who's actually a constitutional lawyer, and the other one is Bruce Fein, who's a very strong civil liberties proponent. So it's been very exciting to see that case evolved. It's very close to filing right now. And there's another one which is brewing. So both of these cases have different legal strategies. Together they are more than the sum of their parts. And each of them basically brings a lawsuit against the Commission on Presidential Debates for essentially restricting the debates and making it a kind of theater of the absurd for Democratic and Republican candidates to drive us crazy. So stay tuned, because the work begins long in advance. We are planning some real mobilizations around this, and in my experience, this has been like one of the biggest hot button issues of any campaign, is when you get excluded from a debate. It can really help galvanize all kinds of people who aren't even involved in your campaign, because Americans on the whole believe in democracy and that we have a right to know who our candidates are and make our own choices. So people go ballistic around censored debates, and we're going to start early as we can, some exciting activities. One of them will likely include a boycott, that is an economic boycott of the sponsors of the Commission on Presidential Debates. So we can talk a language that they will listen to, and start talking that early. and have time to actually build that boycott and force things to happen. So stay tuned. I'm going to announce my website here several times just so that you get it ingrained into your brain. It's jill2016.com. It's that easy. Sign up for the newsletter. You can also sign up to volunteer and let us know, what kind of volunteering you would like to do, because there's a place in this for everybody. We are thinking of a massive 50-state campaign. We will soon be embarking on a, we hope, 50-state ballot access campaign so that every American has the right to vote their values. And in terms of the whole lesser evil thing, by the way, we think it's time to answer the lesser evil with the greater good. We keep getting lesser and lesser all the time, and pretty soon we're going to disappear, into the sunset here because, our society is being dismantled and our ecology that allows us to exist and all that. So, I think there are all kinds of arguments to stand up to lesser evilism, and we can talk about that more when we have open discussion if you'd like to. But I feel like there are so many good answers. And people who want to talk about lesser evilism are dating themselves. They rarely have a hair color that's not gray. Because young people, they don't care about that. They don't need to be persuaded that, that Democrats and Republicans are not the same. From their point of view, they have pretty much the same approach to war, pretty much the same approach to censoring the internet, pretty much the same approach to sending our jobs overseas through the TPP. I mean, on the things that really count, the same approach to going ballistic with carbon emissions and trashing the climate and dumping that on the heads of the younger generation who's going to have to live with it when it's hardly livable right now. It's like, if you think the climate is bad, wait a year, and see what bad looks like, and then another year, because it is accelerating, and it makes it really critical that we do this now. To my mind, that's another answer to the people who want to talk about lesser evilism, which keeps backsliding us on climate, on workers' rights, on global justice, you name it. This lesser evilism is not moving us forward, it's moving us backward, and we're on a timer. We're on a timer right now, and that timer is ticking down, and it doesn't have very much time. We don't have time for marginal apologies. We don't have time to tinker around the margins of a collapsing society and a collapsing ecosystem. We need to stand up for exactly what we need. It's speak now or forever hold your peace, like really, really forever. We are in the midst of the 6th massive extinction right now. Extinction rates are elevated at about 1,000 to 10,000 times background. And for those who don't know what that means, if you want to survive a massive extinction, you need to be about the size of a squirrel or smaller. Large mammals do not survive extinctions. So those who think, oh, it'll be the elephants, and the tigers, you got something coming. It's really all of us, and the writing is on the wall with the bees and the bats, and all the other, and the butterflies for that matter. This is what allows our food chain to exist. We depend on that food chain. So all of that is by way of saying, we have a job to do. I'll just mention one other thing, which is that we can fix this. It's eminently fixable. They want us to think it's not fixable, but it is so fixable, it's like ridiculous not to be fixing it. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, 1942, whatever it was, 4? Who knows their history? 41, thank you. You can see I've been a science geek for most of my life, not a historian. So when Pearl Harbor was bombed, it took 6 months to convert the economy to a wartime footing, to convert the automobile factories into bomber factories, to lay down some rules of the road so that, you know, you had to be in carpools, you couldn't be out at certain hours of the night. I mean, we really revved it because it was a national emergency. But that national emergency is nothing compared to what we're facing right now by way of the global climate emergency. If we could mobilize and change the economy in 6 months, we can certainly mobilize to a green economy and dismantle the military economy, which has been going strong ever since 1941. It's time to change it over to a green economy. We can do that now. And all right. And as we do that, we solve a whole slew of problems. We can put everyone back to work. We have a lot of work to be done, and it needs to happen right now. No unemployment. We can put everyone to work on a quality job, improving our communities, our health, our energy system, et cetera. And we can have massive employment for this emergency economic transition to a green economy, put people to work creating 100% wind, water, and sun energy, completely phasing out by 2030, okay, all fossil fuels and nuclear. So that means no new fossil fuels. Starting now. Starting now, no new fracking, no new offshore drilling, no Arctic drilling, no new nuclear. You know, it means the solution begins now, and we stand up for that, and we put everyone to work creating the alternative on an emergency basis. What that also does is meet our energy needs so that we no longer have this ridiculous rationale for limitless war, limitless, endless war, right? Because we need all these wars for oil and for gas pipelines and all that stuff. Well, guess what? We don't need it anymore, and we don't need any more of those friggin' wars either. So it all comes to an end. So in one fell swoop, it's jobs in the economy, it's climate and the environment, it is peace and foreign relations based on international law and human rights, and, you know, dismantle the bases. I would add that to the military agenda, by the way. Let's bring them home. We don't need those 700, whatever it is, military bases. Talk about, you know, how to downsize the military budget. That's a big one. And then the other payoff here, which doesn't usually get acknowledged, is that we become healthy. When we create an energy system that's healthy for the earth, guess what? It makes us healthy too. And this has been demonstrated not only in the detailed studies. Mark Jacobson, who's an engineer at Stanford, I think, did a fabulous modeling of New York State, and basically found that if you created 100% wind, water, and sun by 2030, it would pay for itself in health savings alone from the benefits of stopping the pollution that's driving heart disease and asthma and emphysema and birth defects and diabetes and all kinds of disabilities. We take air pollution for granted like it's some act of God or nature. It's actually not. It's an extremely unnatural thing, and it makes us sick in all kinds of ways that we, you know, haven't even begun to document yet. But the ones that we've documented are really incredible. So you shut off the pollution. The figures are something like 5 to 8 million people die a year from air pollution. It's really quite staggering. And then you've got more than air pollution going on in this fossil fuel system. You also have the pesticide pollution from the farming, et cetera. And all that is derivative from fossil fuels too. So that's part of the greening here. It's not only the energy system, it's also greening our food system and creating healthy, local, sustainable food systems and community gardens and all that. That together with an active, energy-efficient public transportation system that dovetails with biking and walking. This is how populations get healthy around the world. Exercise and activity is integrated into your life. You don't have to go buy some expensive membership at a health club and drive yourself there in a car every day in order to get healthy. You just walk or you bike to work or to the public transit station. That's how it's supposed to happen. So it turns out, if you actually calculate how much better we get and how quickly this thing pays for itself in practically real time. There was a natural experiment, by the way. You don't have to just look at the studies. This actually happened in Cuba. Cuba has an excellent healthcare system, but forget about that for a minute, because while the same healthcare system existed, Cuba lost its oil pipeline, its oil supply line. And with that, most of its economic activity and its trading partner and all that in the form of the Soviet Union. So when the pipeline went down, suddenly they had to take out the draft animals and put a lot of people to work raising food, organic food, because they were ready with an organic food program, and, you know, and bike and walk, and suddenly the air was clean. There was no more fuel to burn. So when those things happened, what do you think happened to their health? You'd think it's a crisis, the economy's crashing, everybody's stressed out, you'd think their health would be declining. But what actually happened was death rates from diabetes went down 50%, and this was within a couple of years. A lot of people say, oh, I have chronic disease, you know, I'm hopeless, you know, it's not me, it'll be the next generation. That's actually not true. We expend incredible energy keeping ourselves sick. You have to pump bad food into people every day and pump lousy air into them every day to keep us sick. When you stop doing that, we actually get a whole lot better all by itself. It just happens. That's the way we were designed. So when we eat and move like we were designed, we get a whole lot better. Their death rates from heart disease and stroke went down 25 to 35%. All-cause mortality went down 18%. This is documented in the Journal of Epidemiology in statistics collected by Johns Hopkins. So this is not like a fringe analysis. This is pretty rock-solid stuff. And the bottom line is this cost them $0 to have a healthcare revolution we cannot achieve with $3 trillion a year, just by shutting off the dirty energy spigot. So it's pretty incredible what we can do. That also helps this pay for itself. The other thing that helps this pay for itself is that we don't need the military, you know, industrial security complex, which keeps pumping us full of fear. You know, it's like every week there's a new enemy, and great media stories are told so that we think there's a good guy and we think there's a bad guy, and we have to intervene by expending hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weaponry. This is, you know, this is kind of a major pillar of the American economy, and we have been fooled like that for long enough. We need a whole new approach here. So this thing fixes itself. It's a win-win-win. It's a win for our economy. It's a win for our ecology. It's a win for our democracy. It's a win for our health, and it's a win for peace. So we can have it. This is what we're helping to lift up in our campaign, the idea that we can actually do this on a massive scale. Not only do we have dire necessity, but we actually have transformative opportunity right now. We know how to do it. It's not rocket science. We can turn the breaking point that we face into the tipping point we need to take back the peaceful, just, green future we deserve. Let's make it happen.